Everybody, how are you this morning? Welcome to Orion. I got a friend with me today. I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Marley, and I serve on the Hub team.
Marley is one of my amazing volunteers, and she stepped in to hang out, help us out today. But we just wanted to welcome everybody. We're so glad you're with us this morning. We are in week 3 of our heroic moments. Did I get that right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and who is it about today?
Today it is about Samson.
Nice.
Yes.
So Craig McGlasson is giving the message. He always knocks it out of the park. I really just feel like it's going to be an awesome day. So get some coffee, settle in, enjoy the service, and Marley and I will be back at the end of the service to tell you our deep thoughts on the situation. What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Oh, for sure.
For sure. All right. Enjoy. See you guys later.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's so great to see you this morning. Let's stand together and we'll praise God together this morning. means less of me. Take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. Take it all. You are my life and my treasure, the one that I can't live without. Here at your feet, my desires and dreams I lay down. Oh, here at your feet, my desires and dreams I lay down. Oh, if more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. Oh Lord, change me like only you can. Here with my heart in your hands, Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. This world is dying to know who you are. You've shown us the way to your heart. Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. Oh Lord, change me like only you can. Here with my heart in your hands, Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. This world is dying to know who you are. You've shown us the way to your heart. Yes, Father, I pray, make me more like Jesus. Make me more like Jesus. Make me more like Jesus. Oh make me more like you. Make me more like if more of you means less of me, take everything. Take it all. Take it all of you. That's all I need. Take everything. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything. If more of you means less of me, take everything. Yes, all of you is all I need. Take everything.
Thank you, guys. Go ahead and have a seat for a minute. Can we just put the lyrics, if more of you means less of me, please take everything. I know I'm calling it audible. Can we just put that up on the screen and leave it there for a minute? If more of you means less of me, then please take everything. One of the most important people in church leadership in the 19th century was a man named D.L. Moody. Moody, even though he became one of the most important people in the church world and for the sake of the kingdom, he did not begin that way. Moody actually was born to a home that did not go to church, had no faith in Jesus. He was born number 6 in his family, pretty poor, grew up without an education, without a church background. Later on in life, he became a simple shoe salesman, and a friend of his started inviting him to church. And there are records that when Moody first started going to church, there were comments made of him that never had so dark a mind entered the doors of a church before. So this was a guy that just didn't have a church background. He had no interest. His life was going another direction. This was not his life. This was not anywhere on his radar, that there is a God, his name is Jesus, that he is worth saying, take everything I have to give me more of you. But a friend of his kept inviting him. He ended up going to a Bible study where they just sat down and they cracked open the scriptures and started to try to understand who Jesus was. And he was receptive to that invitation and started to go and then go and then go. And it just began to unlock so much for him. There's a point that somebody in that study he heard once say that the world has never yet seen what God can do through a man who is fully devoted to him. I would also add a woman. And it's recorded that Moody said that night at that study, by God's grace, I aim to be such a man. And Moody would go on, not just to give his life to Jesus, but to completely live out that desire. Take more of me to give me more of you. Over the next 25 years, he would travel all around the country, preaching and teaching with no education, no formal training, no degree. He would then be invited to Europe, or he would do the same. By the end of his life, it's estimated, and again, mind you, this is middle of the 19th century. This is no TV that we have today, no radio like we have today, no internet. It's estimated that by the time he died, he had shared the message of Jesus with somewhere in the ballpark of 100 million people. Also went on to start 3 universities, one of which in Chicago today bears his name. He's credited as being the father of the 3rd great American revival. There's a list that you can read of the accomplishments of Moody's life, and it's all because he was a man that truly tried to live as he was once challenged. The world has never yet seen what a man or a woman fully sold out to God can accomplish for him. And so his words, by God's grace, I aim to be such a man, became how he lived his life. More of you and less of me. That's what we're going to talk about this morning. And we're going to do it with a pretty interesting person in the Bible, in the history of humanity, named Samson. So if you know anything about Samson, you know it's going to be a little bit of a buckle your seatbelts. If you don't, welcome to one of the most controversial people in the Bible, and we're going to get to him in just a minute. But can I just kind of bring us to a close in this moment and just pray that truth becomes, to whatever degree more it needs to, becomes a cry of our hearts. So God, I just ask that when we have moments like this, that we sing these words and we get caught up in the music, even if we're not singing, but we're listening, or even if we're feeling stirred by it. I pray, God, we would never be stirred by just music. We would never be stirred by lights. We would never be stirred by somebody even up on this stage. We would be stirred by you. And I pray that as we are, God, that these would be more than words, but they would truly be how we long to live. That we come to a place where we start to believe more and more that to be more like Jesus isn't to be religious. It is to be more and more who you have made us to be, those formed in your image and in your likeness for your plans and for your purposes. And so, God, I pray that you'd speak to us this idea to a deeper place than a song can do, but that I do believe your Spirit can do. Speak to us about this idea that when we say less of us, it can mean more of you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, a few things to let you know about this morning, and then we're going to get deeper into our content today. A couple things that are happening in the next few weeks coming up. Number one, July 30th, after the second service, we're going to be having a party in the green space. So there will be more details to come in the next couple of weeks, but we would love to have you join us. Church, I hope you know this, was never intended to simply be a come for an hour or some odd minutes and then go home. This is supposed to be a community. It is a family. And so one of the ways that we're trying to do that in a place this size, where we've got multiple services, people coming, people going, is to leverage some of what we've just really created, which is our space outdoors. So on the 30th, We're going to grill some food. We're going to have people bring some stuff, and we would just love to have you hang out with us for a little bit after second service for some games, some fun, and just a chance to continue to get to know ourselves as a community and as a people. Also, August 8th is our next midweek coming up. I'm sorry, August 2nd is our next midweek coming up. On our next midweek, we are going to also be utilizing outside. We're going to be doing baptism. So we'll start in here for a typical midweek, and then we're going to move outside towards the end of the night, and we're going to be having baptisms outside. We'd love to have you not just be a part of the night, but if you've not been baptized, we're starting to fill up some names on the list. We would love to have you join us for that, be a part of that. So all the ways on the screen, you can obviously go to the website. You can even go outside at the hub. You can talk to somebody in person and get some answers, or just sign up if you even want. Also, just to let you know, in the summer, our high school and junior high groups, they kind of meet on an on-off schedule. So they're not meeting like in the school year. They're not meeting every single Sunday night because we do a lot of other things throughout the summer as well. Tonight is the rhythm of no meeting for Sunday night. Last week we met. Next week we'll be back again in the building from 4 to 6. Tonight, just to let you know, no high school, no junior high in the building. On that, I do also want to let you know, as sober as this is, this last week, without names right now, and some of you may know and be aware, one of our senior students sadly lost his mom unexpectedly. And so he's just a powerhouse in our community with our students, one of the most dependable students we have, just a great kid, very loved and loves very much. And as you can imagine, the pain is undefinable. So if you would just, even without a name, just knowing that there's a very hurting family in our community, if you could keep him in prayer, keep the family in prayer. God knows who they are. God knows the names and the details. I think it would just be a way for us to ask God to do what we can't do and to come on behalf of that family for them. So this morning, as we lean into the story of Samson, one of the things that I want to talk about for a little bit of time will be one of the consistent things we see happen in the life of Samson, which is him giving ear to the wrong counsel. You guys think of a time that you got bad advice? Anybody? You don't have to raise your hand. Just think of a time you got bad advice. Were you ever your own bad advice? So watch this video for the next couple of minutes of just that tension sometimes of trying to know who to listen to, who not to listen to, what advice is worth giving ear to, and what advice isn't, including the times that the advice to not give ear to might even be your own voice. So check it out.
So as you can see, to reach your financial goal this quarter, cash flow management must improve. Make sure the needs match IT spending and reduce outside professional services. Thank you for your time. That was good. Very good. It was clear, concise, challenging, and conclusive. And conclusive. The 4 C's. Hey, you look a little nervous. Why are you so nervous? I'm not nervous, more ramped up. There you go. You got this. You're gonna kill it. I'm gonna kill it. Say it like you mean it. I'm gonna kill it. You were made for this. I was made for this. Nah. I hear you say the words, but I'm not sure you really feel it. Look, the company needs your help. They reached out to you, right? They came to you. You didn't go to them. You know why that is? Let me tell you why that is. You were the top of your class with a degree in entrepreneurship. You landed 2, not 1, but 2 ridiculous internships, and then already steadied the ship within 3 organizations. Yeah, maybe you're right. Of course I'm right. All right. Maybe I am a little nervous. Hey, what are you doing? Who are you calling? Sandy. Sandy? For what? Don't call her right now. Why? She's my mentor. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. And Sandy's the one who helped me choose my degree. She's also the one that helped me get my foot in the door when I got my first internship. And she's the one who gave me a swift kick in the butt when I almost said no to that job in Chicago. So what? So what? Her thoughts and ideas are invaluable to me. She may be the only reason that I have this opportunity tomorrow. Were. Huh? Her thoughts and ideas were invaluable to you. Hey, you're right. She has a place in your life. She gave great counsel, hard to hear truth at times, and she is a brilliant woman. But you are a brilliant man. You're right. I got this. So as you can clearly see, if you adopt and put into action what I've presented to you, your company will not only survive, but thrive for years to come. Hook, line, and sinker, bro. You were made for this. I was made for this.
I think so often in life, what we end up accomplishing and even who we end up becoming has maybe as much to do with our potential as our counsel. In other words, it has as much to do with our skills and our abilities as who it is that we give ear to kind of guide and direct those skills, guide and direct those abilities, guide and direct, frankly, our life. A couple years ago, so I've told you before, I think, I'm one of 7 in my family, the oldest of 7. There's 3 boys, 4 girls that I grew up with. My youngest of the boys, Caleb, my brother, was getting married a couple years ago, and he lives in Jersey. He's an officer there, and his wife is stationed there for military. So he came into town when they were getting married, and we were hanging out. And one of my favorite things to do is mountain bike. So I'm like, hey, you want to go mountain biking? So I'm older brother, he's younger brother, super competitive. So he's like, yeah, I'll go mountain biking. I'm like, all right. So we go mountain biking. So we hit this course where the entrance is right by this set of condos that have recently been torn down. So as you're coming into the course, there's this massive pile of just, it looks like a pile of dirt, but it's a pile of death. I mean, there's rocks and glass and rebar and you name it from a condo that's been torn down, it's in this pile. So we ride by it, and I'm like, hey, you should totally ride up that and go down it. He's like, yeah, that's dumb. I'm like, okay, well, if you're scared, I totally understand. And so we just, we do the brother thing. So we hit the trail, we ride the trail. On the way back out, I start my bantering again. I'm like, come on, dude, why don't you ride it? Come on. Now you have to understand, my brother, I don't know where this ever came from, but for the course of his life that I can remember, we've joked that he looks like the Lucky Charms leprechaun guy. So we always tell him, we always make jokes about his pot of gold and where it's at. That's going to make sense in just a minute because I'm going to show you a video. So we get back out. We're standing in front of this pile. We're done. We're exhausted. He's like, why don't you ride it? I'm like, bro, I do it all the time. And so I'm like, you should totally try it. So he actually starts to go up this hill. He's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to do it. So I'm like guiding him, and I'm like from below, he's like, hey, what direction should I go? So I pick out the line that I think is going to be the most sketch. I'm like, definitely to the left. You should totally go to the left. At which time he starts to move to the left, and I'm like, oh my goodness, he's going to go down the left. So this is when I decided to pull out my camera and start to film whatever was about to happen. So you're welcome. Here you go.
Oh, he a widow guy. Widow guy be scared. Hey, let me know if you find your pot of gold up there. Or your Lucky Charms. Leave me Lucky Charms alone. What do you think? All right, let's see what you got. If you die, I'm just going to bury you and tell Jessica you ran away. I'm not admitting to this.
Later. There's never a point I watch him fall that I don't think it's hilarious. So good. I actually just thought about this while I was watching it. I'm going to have to send that video to him again. He's probably forgotten. It's my job to remind him. Our lives our lives seldom go off the rails from one single decision. True? It's usually one decision after another, after another, after another, after another. And then if you mix into that bad counsel, like I don't know if you noticed at the very top, did you catch at the very top at one point he actually turned his wheel the other direction than where he rode? That's because he was second guessing me telling him to go that way. And then he went the way I told him to go, and that's what happened. Like there was a gap there that the video just doesn't represent well, that he was not getting over, especially riding his brake the whole way down. But when you make one decision to go off the rails after another, after another, after another, every single step up that hill of his was a decision that ultimately led to him eventually going over the handlebars, particularly because of the counsel that he had in his ear. Yours truly. In the Bible, probably one of the, I think, clearest examples of this truth is Samson's life, in a very sad way. Samson is a man that from before he was born was picked by God, designated by God, to be a man who would step into the needs of the nation of Israel, helping lead them out of captivity from the oppression of the Philistine Empire. And yet that's not how his life ended. As a matter of fact, I want to kind of skip to the end, kind of lay out all the cards here. Samson, the end of his life was very different than how it began in terms of what the expectation was. God picks him, God chooses him, God gives him strength, empowers him. But this is what we read at the end, and then we're going to backtrack in the next couple minutes and see how it was that he got here. Chapter 16, verse 20 of Samson's life says this, "And then she called Samson, 'Samson, the Philistines are upon you.' And he woke from his sleep and he thought, 'I'll go out as before and I'll shake myself free.'" And this is it. But he did not know that the Lord had left him. So let me pray and ask God to be the one that speaks to us this morning. And let's try and understand what it was that led from this man who was picked by God, chosen by God, to at some point God chooses to take his spirit away from him. Father, I just come before you, acknowledge you this morning, Jesus. Ask that as we go through the rest of the day, this service, next service, everything else, God, that you would really help, that it is Jesus who is lifted up above all. Help that we don't walk out of here thinking about message or the music or videos, but what we walk out of here thinking about, wanting to talk about, leaning into is Jesus. And I pray that you would help my words to honor him, to be truthful to who he is and what you have told us about your nature in this book. And I pray, God, that as we try to learn from Samson, a very real man, a very real time in history, with very real potential and very real struggle, that you would help us to see our story, not just to see him, not just to see his, but to see what it is you would have us to know about us as well. Not to point a finger across thousands of years of time to say, I can't believe he did or how could he, but to be willing to look in the mirror and to ask you, as David once did, to search us, know us, and lead us in the way everlasting. And I pray this and ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Hey, we're gonna, as usual, we're gonna take up our offering just a minute, kind of pause before we go further. I just wanna thank all of you for all of your partnership with us at Kensington. There's so many things to be grateful for, just being a part of what Kensington does and how it serves so many people locally and globally, and all of it happens because of you. So we've got buckets that we pass. You can feel free to use those. We also have ways online. If you are not a part of this, we'd love to invite you into it with us. So all the ways on screen that you can see, but I just want to say thank you as these go around and as you do what you are compelled to do. So as I explained last week, the book of Judges, where we're going to find Samson's story, who, mind you, of the 16 chapters, he takes up 4 of them. So this is an incredibly complicated man, incredibly messy life, very dimensional, but in all of it, it finds itself, his story finds itself in a very complicated, messy book, the book of Judges. As I said last week, the book of Judges is, probably one of the darkest time periods in the nation of Israel. This is a period of time where Israel constantly tried to figure out if they could do life apart from God. They were influenced by the culture around them, by cultures around them even, and constantly thought, you know what, maybe God's way isn't the right way. Maybe we can do it better on our own. Maybe we can be better gods of our own life than God can be over our life. And every time they wander off from him, God's not about just saying, follow my rules and be religious people. If God is who he claims to be, he is the author and the maker of all things, then that means living his life, living his way, is to bring us joy, is to bring us life, is to bring us peace. It's not just him being on a power trip. So it would stand to reason then that every time we wander away from the one who made life and knows how it's intended to work, that the consequences are going to be destruction. And the further away we get, the more destruction. And so this is the cycle of Israel. Constantly throughout the book of Judges, you read this phrase, and the people did what was right in their own eyes. And again, the people sinned in the eyes of the Lord. You see this all the time. And it's a period of time where they wander off and they reap all the consequences of it. And usually part of the consequence is another nation or empire coming in and overthrowing them. This is what's happening right now. You've got the Philistine Empire doing this at this particular moment with Samson. But all throughout the book of Judges, this is why God calls a variety of different men, and even Deborah, a woman that we looked at last week, to be these judges, or kind of like these leaders, military commanders sometimes, that are intended to pull the people back to God, to help lead them out of whatever nation is holding them captive, to lead them back to who God is, to lead them back to his ways. The complexity of all of it is that even though God uses these people, most of them are about as jacked up as you can imagine. I mean, among the list, you've got an assassin, you've got a guy that's scared of his own shadow, you've got a guy that can't keep his pants on, you have prostitution, you have murder, you've got stuff as you get to the end of the book that's so vile. Because we got kids around, I won't even read it and won't even say it, but if you go read it, it's like, how is this even in the Bible? Well, it's in the Bible because it can be the expression of the extreme brokenness of humanity. So in all of this, you've got these people that God chooses to use despite their levels of brokenness. And towards the end of all the judges, not the final one, but towards the end, you have Samson, who, as I said, is completely complicated as a human being. He is not just one of the most controversial people maybe in the Bible. I would suggest, given that he was called into the role he was as a servant of God, maybe even in human history. And I think it's important to acknowledge, because Samson is a messy story. To be honest with you, this is one of the few times where I felt super intimidated coming into a Sunday morning because of what we're going to talk about. Because this guy's life is so messy and scattered over 4 chapters that to try and condense it into one Sunday morning, one message, is going to be a little bit challenging. And what can happen as a result is, because of the extreme ridiculousness of his life, because of some of the wickedness of his life, is that you can lose the larger theme and the larger story of what God was up to. So let me go back to the beginning really quickly, give some verbal, and then we'll go to the text. Like, you want to talk about the bigger theme of Samson's life. This was a guy that, unlike other judges, that kind of were found along the way almost. This was a guy that was picked before he was ever born. This was God saying, all right, in the womb, I choose this one. This man is going to be born, set apart from my plans, set apart from my purposes. And part of what God did to use him to lead the nation out of captivity from the Philistines, he said, number one, I'm going to pick you. I'm going to choose you. You're going to be my man. I'm going to send you as the leader over Israel. You're going to rescue them. And to do that, I'm going to give you unbelievable supernatural strength that you could not have on your own. So you've got this man, picked by God, an ambassador of God, chosen by God, to be used by God for God's people, given unbelievable strength. It's kind of like if the Pope and Arnold Schwarzenegger were to have a baby, maybe Conan the Barbarian, you get Arnold Schwarzenegger. But here's part of the problem with Samson, is that we don't get a lot of detail of what he was actually like. So for most of us, if you know anything about Samson, you got any church background, when we think of Samson, what do we think of in terms of stature and size? Maybe on the screen. We think of this, right? We think he had to be powerful. I mean, the things that he did, the things he accomplished, the amount of men he could fight and take on and win, we tend to think he had to be this big, muscle-bound guy. Again, we don't know this for sure. I just want to kind of pose an idea and a thought to you. If Arnold Schwarzenegger walks into a room and benches an unbelievable amount of weight, is anybody surprised? No. But if I do, are you? For real? Yeah, of course, right? I tend to think that Samson was probably much more of a normal-looking guy. And I would just say I'm a pretty normal-looking guy. So just humor me. Here's a normal picture of me on the screen that's probably more like what Samson was like. So normal picture of Craig, right? That's not me. Or is it? All right, we can take it down. Do you know how many people send me his photo all the time? They're like, you look just like... My kids even bought me a figurine. It's in my office right now because they swear that's who I am. So maybe it is. As a part of the purposes that God has over Samson's life, he decides that from day one, he's going to have Samson be visibly set apart from the ways of the world. And so the way that he does this is through what's called the Nazirite vow. So chapter 13 of the book of Judges reads this way. Verse 1, again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now a certain man of Zorah, named Manoah, from the clan of the Danites, had a wife who was childless and unable to give birth. And the angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, you are barren and childless, but you are going to become pregnant and give birth to a son. Now see to it that you drink no wine or fermented drink, and you do not eat anything unclean. You will become pregnant and will have a son, whose head is never to be touched by a razor, because the boy is to be a Nazirite, dedicated to God from the womb. And he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So part of what God does in delivering not only the miracle of his birth, is that he also says, this one's going to be set apart, like from the ways of the world and for the ways of my kingdom. He's going to be set apart from day one. And his setting apart is what's this Nazirite that's mentioned. It's actually not, this isn't the first time that the Nazirite idea is introduced in the Bible. The Nazirite vow is a vow that men or women could take. It's usually a seasonal thing. It's for a time period. And it's a way for you to say, hey, I am taking this season of life and I am dedicating myself so wholly and so focused on God and his plans, who he is and what he wants for my life, that I'm going to make 3 vows in my life that identify that I'm being set apart right now. Those vows are you can't drink anything fermented, you can't touch anything dead or unclean, and you can't cut your hair. Now, the unique thing about Samson is that this wasn't a season. This was his life. This was who he was supposed to always be. And even though this is a vow anybody could take, there's only 3 people in all the Bible that are ever picked and chosen, and kind of that vow is placed on them. Jeremiah, Samson, and in the New Testament, you've got John the Baptist. So Samson falls already into a unique category of just in all creation humanity, God looking at him still in the womb and saying, I'm setting you apart from my plans and my purposes from day one of your birth. If I understand one of the consistent themes throughout this book, it's that you and I, while we may not be expected to take on Nazirite vows, you and I are also, I believe, picked by God to be set apart for his ways and from the ways of this world from before we're born. Like, that's not a unique thing just to Samson. Maybe the nature of what marked him for that was unique, these 3 things that he had to live by. But you and I, if I understand so much of what God says to us throughout this book, we are also seen by him, still in the womb, chosen by him, picked by him, and set apart by him, for him, and from the ways of this world. The problem is that like Samson, is that the choices we make throughout the course of our life, and the people we choose to give our ear to for counsel can eventually, if we're not careful, not lead us towards God's plans, but lead us going over the handlebars. So Samson, with his life that was supposed to be set apart, decides along the way at some point early on, I'm going to start trying to toe into the water and do it my way and see if it can work differently than what God has me set apart for. So I want to go back to the text. And again, we can't go through every aspect of Samson's life because there's just too many details over 4 chapters. So I'm going to read a little, I'm going to try and sum it up, and then we're going to try and make sense of it. But chapter 14 tells us this about Samson. At some point he grows, he gets older. It says verse 1 of chapter 14. So Samson went down to Timnah, and he saw a young Philistine woman there. And when he returned, he said to his father and his mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now go get her for me as my wife. It's a very different time. His father and mother, I'm trying to picture my son, just got married. If he came home, he's like, Dad, he met her here on stage. I have seen a woman. Go get her for me. I'm like, boy, you're a knucklehead. Come here. Like, so understand, different time. I get it. Weird. His father and his mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives? Again, context, even weirder, right? How about your cousin? Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among your own people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to have a wife? Again, remember, this is the people that God has chosen him, set him aside for, to lead the Israelites out of the hands of. But Samson said to his father, Get her for me. She's the right one for me. Skip down to verse 5. It says, Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and his mother. And as they approached the vineyards in Timnah, suddenly a young lion came out roaring towards him. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, just like he might have torn apart a young goat. But he told neither his father or his mother what he had done. And then he went down and walked with the woman, talked with her, and liked her. You know, really quick side note, if you find yourself on a path in life and some kind of obstruction comes in your way, doubtful it's going to be a lion for you, but it will be whatever it is, it's your lion. You know, it might be a really good indication at times that that's God standing in front of you saying wrong direction. There are so many times that we get off the rails by pushing through opposition that was actually intended by God to be redirection. And so Samson decides, instead of redirection, I'm just going to destroy it. Tears it apart, goes down, meets her, talks with her. Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside and he looked at the lion's carcass. And he saw it in a swarm of bees and some honey. And he scooped out the honey with his hands and he ate it. And then he went along. And when he rejoined his parents, he gave them some. And they ate it too. This is like Mufasa kielbasa with a side of honey glaze. But he did not tell them where he had taken it from. Again, remember part of his vow, you can't touch a dead thing. Again, in and of itself, is this a huge thing? It's a slip. You might seem silly. He took honey out of a dead lion, but it's a deviation from the vow he had made. It's God saying, this is what your life is about, and it's one small step in the wrong direction of many others that he continues to take. And now his father went down to see the woman, and there Samson had held a feast, as was customary for young men. And when the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. So let me tell you a riddle, Samson said to them. If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, they said. And so he replied, out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. For 3 days, they could not give answer. All right, here's what I'm going to do a little bit of summing up. So here's what happens going beyond this. The people are trying to figure out what in the world is the answer to this riddle. But, I mean, killing lions and having honey grow inside of them, not a normal thing. Nobody's going to figure out the riddle. So they go to his wife at the time, and they start asking her, hey, tell us what the riddle is. Tell us what the riddle is. So she starts in his ear, hey, what's the answer? I'm not going to tell you. Oh, come on, if you love me, I'm not going to tell you. If you really cared about me, so he tells her. So she tells the people. So the people eventually come back, and they answer the riddle. So Samson knows there's no way you would have known the answer to the riddle except that my wife had told you, so something is going on here. I'm not cool with this. So he loses his temper, throws an absolute fit, goes to another town, kills 30 people, takes their clothes, and delivers those clothes to close out the bet. And then he storms off. So his dad assumes, well, I guess he doesn't want to be married anymore to her. He's probably furious. So he marries off her to another friend of his that was actually at the party. Samson finds out about this sometime later, comes back into town, is furious about it, catches 300 foxes, ties them together, lights them on fire, sends them into the grain fields. They burn down the grain fields. The people are furious. So they're like, who burned our grain fields? They're like, Samson did. He's mad because you guys took his wife away. So they go take her and her father and burn them to death. I said, this is like super, super crazy passage in the Bible. So Samson then finds out what happened. He gets mad, and he kills a whole bunch of people as a result of it. And then he takes off, and it says he goes to a cave where he's just going to pout and be in his alone time. 3,000 men then are like, okay, he burned our fields. He killed a bunch of people. We're going to go get him. So 3,000 men come. The Israelites are like, whoa, what are you here for? They're like, not you, him. They're like, well, we'll help you. So they tie him up, deliver him to the Philistines. Samson breaks out of the bonds he's tied in, picks up a donkey jawbone, and kills 1,000 of the men, and the rest of them run off. Like, this is the guy God picked to lead Israel, and he continues to just jack his own life up. And then for a period of time, we don't know exactly how long, it seems as if he disappears off the radar. And then suddenly in chapter 16, we read this. One day Samson went to Gaza, where he saw a prostitute, and he went in to spend the night with her. And the people of Gaza said, Samson is here. So they surrounded the place, and they lay in wait for him all night at the city gate. And they made no move during the night, saying, at dawn we will kill him. But Samson lay there only until the middle of the night. And then he got up, took hold of the doors of the city gate together with the two posts, tore them loose, bar and all. He lifted them to his shoulders and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Sometime later, he fell in love with a woman in the valley whose name was Delilah. And the rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, "See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we might overpower him, that we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver." And so Delilah said to Samson, "Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued." Again, if you know the story, you know where this goes. For the sake of those that maybe don't in the room, this is kind of like with his first love. Goes back and forth. She's like, "Please tell me." And he tells her all these things that don't work. "Well, if you tie me up. Well, if you do this." And then people show up and he breaks free and they fight and people die. And this continues to happen time after time after time again until finally she just guilt trips him enough. She's like, "If you really love me, you'd really tell me." He's like, "Fine, fine, fine. If you cut my hair, I lose my strength." And so at the end of the story is they come in and she's cut his hair, and that's where we read a minute ago at the start of it, that they show up and he's like, I'll just break free like in times past. What he did not know is that this is when the Spirit of the Lord had left him. And they take him captive, and they do atrocious things to him until eventually he dies alongside many of them. So what in the world do you do with that story? Well, for starters, I think Samson's unchecked emotions, out of control emotions, the bad counsel that he continued to allow in his ear, I think his parents that went along with things that they shouldn't have gone along with, I think all of it leads to Samson not just having a destructive life for himself, but I think creating a destructive life all around him. God does end up using all of that in his own sovereignty to end up leading the nation to freedom. But along the way, Samson, he ends up living one of those kinds of lives that basically everything he touches, he destroys. Definitely somebody that goes over the handlebars. Supposed to be a hero turns into more of a zero. And if you've paid attention the last number of years to the church world to any degree, then you know that one of the things we've seen in the last decade has been an unbelievable amount of heroes, quote unquote, if you will, of the faith that have gone over the handlebars. Men and women who have chosen one step after another step after another step and wrong counsel, and before you know it, instead of fulfilling God's purposes and being set apart, they end up becoming a part of the world, and they end up going over the handlebars and creating all kinds of destruction. I also think it's important to note that there have been countless more men and women who have served the kingdom who have not gone over the handlebars, but we love to highlight and lean into those who have. But there's no denying in the last couple of years with the attention given to the church world that there are a lot of people we have looked up to. A lot of men and women that have had platforms to influence others, to lead others, to help others that have sabotaged all of it. It's also not something unique to the church world. We see it in politics. We see it in Hollywood. We see it in sports. We see it all over the place, even in much more personal places like your own life, your own family, your own friends. Probably most of us in here have somebody in our life right now that at one point drew enormous amounts of respect from us and now just draws disappointment because we saw them also use what God had given them to their own selfish gain, went over the handlebars, and negatively affected the people around them instead of being used for the kingdom and how God intended. With Samson, I think you could probably point to a number of different things at work with Samson. But three things I think are at work with Samson that could potentially be at work with us to derail us as well over the handlebars from what God intends our life to be and what God intends our life to accomplish is lust, entitlement, and pride. I want it. I deserve it. I can handle it. I don't think lust needs a ton of explanation, not at least in Samson's case. Right? For Samson, there was just something alluring about the Philistine women. Maybe it was that they dressed different, or they danced different, or it was an accent that they had, or maybe for Samson, living the Nazirite vow, maybe he looked at them free from the religious vows that he could have seen at some point and just able to do whatever they wanted, and he saw that as more liberating. But for whatever it was, there was an idea in Samson's head that told him, I need her, and if I have her, I will be satisfied. I'll be satisfied emotionally, I'll be satisfied relationally, I'll be satisfied sexually, I'll be satisfied spiritually. That's always the lie of lust. The lie of lust is what will satisfy you. And it doesn't just have to be the same things that were the lie of lust for Samson. Maybe it's your own career. Just this idea, if I get to the certain achievement, and it's not just a pursuit to do well in your job, there's a lust that drives you, that you have to have it because then you'll be satisfied. Maybe it's the acknowledgement of your friends. Maybe it's a certain respect online. Maybe it's in a certain friend group. Maybe it is a relationship thing. But there is a potential for us to give in to the lie of lust, which is always about what you need to be satisfied. And Samson gave into it. Then there's the lie of entitlement. Again, you see this also in his relationships. There's this idea that was present in Samson's head, not just that he wanted it, but he deserved it. Right? Maybe there's a part of him that thought, listen, I've lived my life in this Nazarite vow. I've been set, I haven't cut my hair, I haven't had a margarita, I haven't done any. Maybe there's just a point where he's like, you know what? I've done all this for God. I've been set apart. I deserve a little day. I deserve a little fun. I mean, I deserve to break free a little bit from this. You even see it in how he treats the people when he loses the bet. Right? What does he do? He loses the bet for the garment thing with the lion and the honey riddle that he posed, and he goes to another town, kills 30 people, and takes their clothes. This is why entitlement is so dangerous. Entitlement doesn't just affect you, it affects the people around you, because at the birth of entitlement is this idea: I deserve, fill in the blank, more than you. And so what we tend to do is whatever we feel like we deserve, we pursue it at the expense of someone else. Entitlement is always the lie that says to us, I deserve it. Lust is the lie that says it will satisfy me. And then there's pride. You know, back in chapter 14, when he first saw this woman in Timnah and said, Dad, get her for me. Dad tries to talk him out of it. Hey, I'm not sure this is a great idea. I don't know if this is the direction for you. I mean, like, the Philistines? Really? And he says to her, Dad, it's okay. I got this. I mean, that's essentially what he's saying to him at one point. Dad, go get her. She's right for me. He's like, I got this, Dad. It's all good. I can handle this. Pride will usually tell us two lies, and it's two sides of one coin. The two lies of pride are essentially, number one, is that you're more important than you are, and number two, that you're more competent than you are. That doesn't mean you're not important, and it doesn't mean that you're not competent. But pride will always whisper in your ear that you're more important than you are, and that you're more competent than you are. And it will lead you to believe that you can handle or take on things that you were never intended to handle or take on. I'm good, I got it, I can handle this, I'm fine. Which will always lead you away from doing one of the most important things that we're intended to do in our walk with God, which is to reach out to somebody. When you have those moments to say, I'm not good, I can't handle this, it is more powerful than me, I need some help right now. Whether that's reaching out to a friend individually, whether that's reaching out like through a place like Kensington to a thing like CR. I mean, we have Celebrate Recovery here, which I think sometimes in its name is an unfortunate misunderstanding that it's only about recovering from addiction. It's recovering from anything that would be the types of things that would lead you to believe that this is better than what God has for you. Whether it's some kind of habit that you just can't seem to kick, whether it's a hurt that just plagues you year after year, whether it's a hang-up that you're like, why can't I stop going back to this same thing? For Samson, the pride had lied to him enough to believe not only was he more important than he was, but this is good, Dad, I can handle this, I can take care of this. The sad reality of Samson's life is this was a guy that was, listen, remember, handpicked by God to be the person who would lead Israel out of their captivity. But because of his own decisions, and because of the people he continued to let his ear hear the counsel of, which were the wrong people, he ends up destroying virtually everything around him in the process. And not just destroying everything in the process around him, also him, all the way up to his own very tragic end. So I think if there's to be anything to take from the life of Samson, it's essentially this. If it's true that you and I are all born to be set apart by the God who made us, who knows us, who has plans for us, then how do we avoid going down the same rail that Samson did and eventually going over the handlebars? Maybe a couple questions that you're not going to resolve here in our little bit of time today, but I hope you'll take them with you and give serious attention to these questions in the next couple of days or weeks. For example, on your screen, question number 1, what visibly marks me as set apart for Jesus? Maybe you're not a follower of Christ. Maybe you're just kind of feeling out the whole church thing and God thing, and you're like, I don't even know if there is or if Jesus is. I'm just kind of here. But there's plenty of us here That you would say of yourself, no, I'm a follower of Jesus. So let me ask you, what marks your life as visibly set apart for Jesus? For Samson, it was this Nazirite vow. God's not asking you to take a Nazirite vow per se. But I do think our lives should be marked by indication that says this person's set apart for Jesus, more than simply being able to point to the fact that you go to church on Sundays. Like, our pursuit of Jesus should have reflection in our life that says they're set apart for God. Things like how we treat people, the language we use, what we use to entertain ourselves with, how we behave at work, the jokes we tell, the jokes we laugh at, how we spend our money, how we spend our leisure. Like, on and on and on and on and on. There should just be indication in our lives that say, if you believe God has set you apart for his ways and from the ways of this world, your life should reflect that. You should see that in how you treat people, how you treat yourself, how you go about life, how you love people. Your life should have mark. I think far too many times it's really easy for those of us as Christians, and I'm guilty of this way too many times in my own life, of having more marks and more indication of our life that say I'm actually of the world, not marks that say I'm set apart from the world. And this is, please hear me, this isn't like a legalistic thing. This is not like, you just got to go do better things to be better for the sake of being good. Like, we have all kinds of things in our life that mark us for certain realities that are true about us. How many of you are wearing a wedding ring this morning? That marks you as set apart from the rest of the world for someone else. I don't wear this wedding ring because if I wear it enough and Nicole sees it enough, then maybe she'll really love me. I don't wear this out of fear. I don't wear this for any other reason than that I already love her and she loves me. And it is an outflow. It is a reflection of that love saying to the rest of the world, I'm set apart for her and from everyone else. Like, this isn't a strange thing to be set apart. So I'm asking you, does your life have indication that you're set apart? I think it's a valuable thing at times to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, what marks me as set apart for Jesus? And I think even more so to ask yourself, if I'm not living set apart for Jesus, is it possible that I'm living my life in such a way that I am not just wandering away from his plans, but I am doing it to the detriment of my own life and to the lives of the people around me? And if you know Samson's story, here's what you could argue back. You could say, well, sure, but God still used Samson, and ultimately through his life, he rescued the Israelites from the Philistines. True, because God is good and God is sovereign and God will eventually and ultimately get his way. However, in the process, because of Samson's choices, his first love was murdered, his second love betrayed him, he was captured by his enemies, made a slave, his eyes were gouged out, and he died in a building collapse. Like, I would not say Samson lived his best life possible, nor did he fulfill in all of that what God, I think, would have hoped and intended for his life to become. Second question would be this: who do you need to stop listening to? What voice in your life do you need to stop listening to? And maybe it's a real voice, maybe it's an old voice from the past, it's just still in your head, maybe it's your own voice. Seldom do we go off the rails in life and eventually over the handlebars that does not involve giving ear to the wrong counsel. Samson did it, we do it, some of us are doing it right now. One of the old voices I had to learn how to kick out of my head, it was a voice of my upbringing. It was where I grew up and how I grew up and the family dynamic I grew up in. It created a voice that told me all kinds of things that weren't true about who God made me to be. All of us have voices that we listen to. And maybe it really is a voice right now. Maybe it's a group of friends. Maybe it's a particular person. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a spouse. Maybe it's a boss. But part of what's important for us to ask, how do we not go over the handlebars, is to acknowledge with honesty right now, there's probably some voices that I know when I listen to them, when I'm around them, when I give ear to their counsel, I tend to go away from what God would have for me and not to what God would have for me. So who are the voices you need to listen less to? And then here would be the third and the final question to maybe give some consideration to. What lust, entitlement, or pride could threaten God's plans for your life? What lust, what entitlement, what pride could threaten God's plans for your life? The whole series is called Heroic Moments. Samson is an interesting person in the series because much of what we see from Samson's life is what not to do, not what we should go. That's how you be a hero. You know what the heroic thing Samson could have done would have been? It's the one thing he repeatedly failed to do, which is to deny himself. The most heroic thing that Samson could have done was to say no to his own longings, his own passions, his own desires, was just to deny himself. We live in a world right now that is driven by self-gratification. You do what you want. You do it when you want. You do as much as you want. You be what you want. Everything about our world is driven by this message and this lie that you just do what you want, self-gratification, and you'll be fulfilled. We maybe have a more difficult time than ever in human history to figure out how to deny ourselves. And yet it's the very reason, and you know this, when you look at some of the people you love and care about or know from a distance, it's the very reason that it has led to such great levels of destruction in so many people's lives is because they did not ever say no to themselves. Later on, Jesus would actually end up saying, generations later, that this is intended to be one of the clearest marks of a follower of his. The book of Matthew, chapter 16, says this: "From this time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day and then raised to life. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. 'Never, Lord,' he said, 'this shall never happen to you.' And Jesus turned aside to Peter and said, 'Get behind me, Satan, for you are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns.' And then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow after me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it.'" Jesus is acknowledging that God has a plan for him. And Peter says, no, not that plan. And Jesus says, no, not your counsel. And then he goes on to say, you know what, Peter? For you and for all who will ever come after me to follow me, here's part of what should mark you. Deny yourself, pick up your cross, follow in the footsteps that I am walking in. Samson's pretty different from all the other judges for many different reasons, one of which was a lot of the judges were just kind of found along the way. They were already grown, they were already leading in some ways. Samson was picked and chosen before he was ever born. Listen to me, so were you. Picked and chosen by God, for God, to be set apart from this world, though in this world, for the plans and the purposes of our King. Samson was anticipated by a generation that needed him to be who God had made him to be. You, I would say, are needed by the generation that God has placed you in to be the man or the woman God has made you to be. And I would go back to D.L. Moody's words, and I would offer them to you. The world still has yet to see what a man or a woman fully devoted to God can accomplish in this life. And not just the world, your family has yet to see it. Your workplace has yet to see it. Your neighborhood has yet to see it. Your children have yet to see it. Your church has yet to see it. So my question to you, to myself, to us is, will we be such men and women? And I say, by the grace of God, may we be. Father, I pray for your words. I pray that they would ring in our hearts, they would ring in our minds, that people like the life of Samson would serve to us as both warning and example, as both inspiration, but also, God, truth, that you have made us, you have picked us, you have chosen us, and you have intended for us to know life so deeply with you that though we are in this world, we would be set apart from this world. But would we equally be aware of all the many things from our own voice, our own desires, and those all around us that would have us derailed from that, living less life than you have made us for, less impact than you have made us for? If it's true, God, that the world has yet to see what you can accomplish through a man or a woman who is wholly and solely sold out to you, then I ask by your grace that you would make us such men and women. Amen. Let me just pray. God, we do need you. And some of us are aware of that, and some of us aren't yet. I pray wherever we're at in that spectrum, God, whether we really don't believe we need you, or whether we're convinced of it, or whether we're in a place where we know we need you, but we're giving our lives to something lesser, wherever we're at, God, would you do what only you can tenderly do, which is to speak to us with the invitation of your voice, with the invitation of your spirit and presence, to draw us to a life that is rich and deep and powerful and profound, that is in you. That we would know more and more every day that in fact we do need you. We need you deeply, we need you desperately. God, I pray that as we go throughout this week, that you would just be so good as to constantly whisper into our ear over our life the fact that you are, that your name is Jesus, that you are wildly passionate about us, and that your way of life just is better. That you are who we are made for, and you are what we are made for. And it's in your name we pray. Amen. Hey, as you go out this morning, we have a team of people. It's a prayer team that would love to serve you if we can do that, whether down here at the stage or even out at the table in the lobby. If you need to talk to somebody, pray with someone, let us do that with you before you go into the rest of your week. Otherwise, have a great week, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Wow.
We are.
What a great service. What'd you think, Marley?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've never heard the story before, so that was really great to learn about Samson.
Love that.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Okay, you said you had a takeaway. What was your big takeaway?
Yeah, I think that so many of us can relate to, really the Samson's life and diving into things that we shouldn't and going down that wrong path.
Right?
Yeah, really just leads us into being more reflective and, denying ourselves. So I think that was a great message. And
I love it. Yeah. I've never done that. I've never gone down the wrong path. I mean, have
really?
you? Right?
Oh, never.
Totally
Never.
kidding, obviously. Anyway, it was an awesome message.
Yep.
I need to probably take it home and unpack it a little bit more, but we're so glad you guys were with us.
Yeah.
Come back next week. Come and join us. We'll be here again, 9 and 11. So have an awesome day, Orion. Take care. Bye.